Thanks, everybody. Glad to be back on stage here at ng-conf. It's probably one of the most awesome conferences I've ever been at and had a chance to speak at, so super excited to be back here. So today my talk is going to be about Angular 2 for the rest of us. So kind of like a story like when I wanted to learn Angular 2, started like back when it was like alpha, like super early on, and I was terrified. I was just like, well, what's this? I don't know if I want to do this. So this is kind of like a story and some of the things that I learned along the way to help me navigate those waters. So I'm an engineer at Udacity, also co-founder Angular class with Patrick back there. So Angular 2 is not easy to make. We all know that. If you've ever tried to contribute to it, you probably looked at the code and was like, who wrote this? At least that's how I feel sometimes. So it was not easy to make, but thankfully it's really easy to use. It was designed to be easy to use, thankfully, so that's awesome. The Angular team, I think, has superpowers. I know a lot of people on the Angular team, and like I listen to them talk and I watch them, just like, yeah, that person definitely has like powers, like a mutant or something, because like the stuff that they do over there is amazing, right? It's nothing short of amazing. I don't have superpowers, unfortunately. I wish I did. But I want to be productive with Angular. I really do. I really love Angular, and I want to build cool stuff with it. So, you know, how can we do that? Some people can read books, some people can look at docs and have it all figured out. I'm not one of those people. So I gotta experiment with how I can get productive with something. So what I found out was, sorry, you gotta build fun things and compare what you're building to what you already know. So we all know something, we're all good with something. Maybe it was Angular 1 Next, maybe it was React or whatever. We're all good with something probably, so if we can compare that to what we're trying to learn, it'll be a lot easier to learn. And if we're building something really cool. So that's kind of the approach that I took. So here's how I got started with that. Here's some of the stuff I did know coming into Angular 2. I knew ES 2015. I was pretty familiar with a build system, component architecture, and Angular 1X. Because it's going to help me here, right? It's the same thing. No, it's not. It's not. But I did know that. What I did not know TypeScript. Just didn't know it. We'll talk about that a little bit. I did not know observables or RxJS. Zones or zones.js. And do I even need to know this? Right? You go look at the docs and you look at the imports and like, wait. There's this thing called zone.js in the package.json. We're importing it. Let me go down this rabbit hole and like research it. Do you need to know this? Maybe not. You don't know at first. So I just assumed that this is something I needed to know. I did not know it. And obviously I didn't know Angular. So like everybody, what I did was I started with the docs. And this is where everything started getting crazy for me. And I realized this was going to be a pretty crazy journey. So I started with the docs, which were pretty decent at the time. And this is what I did. I was so frustrated. I went into the docs and I was just like, looking at the API docs and I was just like, WTF. And that's what I saw. And I was just like, what? Wait, Angular wants me to leave the docs? All right. I thought it was a sign. Like it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I thought like Igor and Misko was like outside my window like trolling me, and I was just like, all right, they're watching me. Like I got to do this. I got to do this the hard way. So I left the docs. But reading the docs kind of told me that I need to understand TypeScript a little more. I've been a little hesitant to try TypeScript, a little timid of it. So I decided to learn TypeScript. So when I started that journey, this is what I thought it was. I thought it was this. I was like, no. No. This is what I thought TypeScript was, and I was just like, no, not doing it. Granted, this was prior, I think this was maybe even pre 1.5, but I was just like, no, I don't know if I want to do this. Yeah, really sad. But what it really is, it's just this. Does that look familiar? Right? It's just ES 2015, really, especially at the 1.5. They actually just built on top of that. So the key takeaways I learned from learning TypeScript, it's really just ES 2015 plus all extra features are optional and awesome. and you should pretty much use them. They're all optional though. And tooling is free and life-changing. I think that was the biggest thing for me. I set up the tooling correctly with some help from some friends, and I was just like, man, like, this is it. Like, for this one reason alone, like, it was a thing for me. So that was TypeScript. So I know that, you know, I brought some of my prior knowledge from working with Angular 1x, from working with React, and I kind of understand the component architecture. So I was like, okay, cool. First thing I need to do is I need to learn how to make components in Angular. I read some blog posts, I looked at the docs, but it just, I don't know, I was still like, this looks kind of weird. So I was like, all right, if I can make a component, I'll be one step closer to making something and being productive with this application. So again, referencing things that I know. So here's an example of a fluffy component. If you can't see all that, don't worry about it. We're going to go through it. So I call it a fluffy component because it's not really like a basic component. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So the first thing that kind of tripped me out, that we have this property on this component decorator called directives, but we passed in a component. That kind of tripped me out because I thought that that was a component and not a directive. So I actually was trying to be predictive and was like, all right, I'll just put a components property right there and pass in a component or something like that. Well, turns out components are directives. They're just directives with templates, and it's all over the docs. I don't know how I missed that, but I was stuck on that for like 3 days. So yeah, components are directives. They're a type of directives with just templates. And then right here, you know, another thing I want to do is like, well, you know, if I can find a way to query the DOM and do some jQuery type stuff, I'll be another step closer to being productive too. So this is how you would do this in Angular 2, or at least this is one way to do it. You would use one of like the view children to query the DOM, and you can look for elements inside your component, which returns an observable, and then you can do stuff with that. So here's a way to manipulate the DOM. So again, one step closer to being productive, just figuring out the way of what's happening here. Then I also needed to figure out how to interface with my components, how to pass things in, how to listen for things that were happening, and then they have these input and output decorators. So a little note on decorators. This was my first time ever seeing decorators on properties. Like, I've seen them on the class level. When I seen them on the properties, I thought it was like a typo. I actually, like, I hit up Patrick, was like, yo, I think their docs are wrong. Like, they got some weird stuff going on here. Like, I don't think you could do that. And it was like, nah, man, like, check it out. So he like put me on to like, you know, reflection and metadata, and I was like, oh yeah, because you know everybody knows reflection. You learn about variables, you learn about primitive types, and then you learn about reflections, right? It's the first thing you learn about. Nobody knows about reflection and metadata, so I was kind of confused about that, but it totally helped me out with that. So yeah, these input and output, they're really just allowing Angular to know about, to tell Angular like, hey, I want you to attach an input configuration to this property and output configuration to this property, and so forth. So it's pretty simple there. Takeaways from components. Your app will actually be a tree of components. If you've never built an app with component architecture before, this is your first time, you haven't stepped into 1.5 on Angular, you haven't stepped into something like React, this is your first time building an app with component architecture, your app is just going to be a tree of components. Like, that's pretty much it, the basics. And components are directives with a template. And that sounds super simple, but for some reason, like, it just didn't register to me for some reason, I don't know why. Inputs and outputs define your directives interface. So again, if you ever use any other framework, like if you come from React, this is kind of like prop types, something like that. So this is going to define your, you know, how you interfere or how you interact with your components. So very important. And use lifecycle methods and built-in decorators for DOM manipulation. So view child, view children, view child, all those things you can use, and you can get reference to the actual native element of those children. And you got to tie them into the lifecycle methods because they might not be ready upon like construction. But that's getting deep. This is Angular for the rest of us and not Angular for the best of us. So I'm not going to get deep. Services. Services they're pretty straightforward. Except for one thing that was just, I don't know, it was kind of weird for me. So here's what a basic service looks like, right? It's actually just a class. Sorry, it's just a class. Until you look at this, okay? Again, remember I said TypeScript, all the stuff is optional. Well, this is where it's not optional if you want to use dependency injection here in the service. You actually have to take advantage of some of the stuff that TypeScript provides. So here we have this injectable decorator. Now this is necessary because of a few things. One, we're trying to let Angular know that we want to provide this lunch service with another service. So this is telling the injector that, hey, we're letting you know that we're going to inject something. The other thing is TypeScript cannot handle metadata without a decorator. So that's why we have to have this decorator. I personally think that that decorator should have been called services and not injectable, but that's what it's called. It's called injectable. So we have to have that, therefore we can inject a burger service in there. We don't need to add injectable if we don't plan on adding any services, but honestly, you should just put injectable in every single service that you make, because it might come back and bite you if you don't, so just do it. So takeaways for that: if your service needs a service, make it injectable. Like I said, if you're going to need a service, new service, make it injectable. Also, like I said, just make every single service you have injectable. Like, it should just be injectable. Otherwise, you're probably going to go back and change it anyway. Oh yeah, this one definitely got me. So because we can use providers on different levels on components, without getting too deep into how DI works in Angular, you can pretty much provide your services on any level in the component tree, but there's some things you got to watch out for, because wherever you provide that service, it's going to be instantiated new. So if you share in state and you provide that service at a level, you might have multiple instances of that state, whereas you only wanted one instance. So what the pattern I'm doing is I'm actually just providing the service as high as possible. That way I don't have to worry about that until it becomes an issue. And then I go back and like, okay, I'm actually going to put it on this component instead of like all the way up here. So that's what I've been doing. Because that kind of bit me in the butt. I was like debugging this. I think I gave up on it actually. I think this is the point where I kind of gave up on Angular 2 for a minute. And I was just like, nah, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. But Patrick came in and saved me, so thanks, Patrick. Okay, observables and RxJS. Now, I've known about observables, I've known about RxJS way before Angular 2, but I'm the type of person I won't go learn something unless like I need to learn it. Like I'm building a project with it, if I have like a task assigned to it, or like, I'm going to be teaching a curriculum on it, like I need to learn it, obviously. I didn't have any of those use cases for observables or RxJS at the time, so I just never decided to learn it. But my goal to be productive in Angular 2 kind of forced me into this. So what I thought they were, I don't know. I had no clue. I seriously had no clue what they were. You know, I just had no clue. I just didn't do a lot of research into it, and I looked at some things, and I was like, wait, I don't know. I mean, why would I use this over promises? I just don't get it. Like, I really just don't get this. Actually, this one is too big to see here, so I just wrote it here. Let me blow that up. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about observables here. So Angular has built-in support for observables with an external library called RxJS, right? You have to import it yourself. But it's baked in, it's pretty awesome. And we're just gonna walk through some of the stuff that Angular does with it and some of the decisions that it makes. So right here we have this service, this user service here. See that? It's injectable. Gotta make sure it's injectable. Otherwise we couldn't do this, right? So this first method right here is fetch me. It's using the built-in HTTP service, which by default is going to return an observable. And if you've ever used RxJS, you know that there are tons of operators that you can use. I mean, smorgasbord of operators. That's what kind of threw me off, because I was like, well, I don't know what to do here, you know? Like, and every use case I saw was like Jafar making drag and drop, and I was like, I'm not making a drag and drop, Jafar. Like, I need to figure something else out. So I was kind of lost. So I was like, I kind of looked at it like from a standpoint of like, well, this kind of looks like Lodash. Some of the same methods are similar, so I kind of figured that out, and I was like, well, let's play around with that. And it turns out I was right. RxJS is actually like Lodash for like asynchronous events over time. So it's pretty simple for me to like conceptualize that after I thought about it that way. So this is just returning an observable, which we're mapping, and we're just getting the data property from the response. And then down below is we're using the native window.fetch, which returns a promise, and we're just using .then. I mean, really the only difference here is this method name, map, and then. And in this case, we're going to go a step further of how you actually get the data and how you resolve it. But so far, the only difference is the method that we're calling here. So we come down to our component, which you can see I didn't inject the service in here. I actually put it globally, which may be an anti-pattern. Don't do what I do. Follow the style guide. But anyway, so we have the service injected in here. So we call the the method that's going to return the observable. So the way I like to think about observables, which kind of helped me out, was that I think observables are just like, they're just like lazy teenagers. Like, they're just not going to do what you tell them to do until the last minute, until you like threaten to take away their Xbox or something. Then they'll do it. And that's what the subscribe method is. That's you taking away their Xbox. It's like, like, all right, now do it. Okay, so that's what observables are. So you can call fetch me. It's not gonna, nothing's gonna happen until you subscribe. Whereas a promise here, the trigger is actually when you invoke this method here. It's more like a soldier. Like they'll do whatever you say when you say it, and they'll wait till it's done. So that's pretty much the difference that kind of made sense to me with observables and promises. So the promise is the async event is going to be called as soon as you invoke this method, whereas on the observable it's not going to be called until you subscribe. In both cases, we get the same data back. So those are the difference. Now, Angular does have built-in promise support. You can call toPromise on this, and it will return the promise and not the observable. But why do that, right? Like, come on, like, use observables. It's there. Cool. And then I just bootstrapped it here and then passed in the user service. So let's go back to this. So takeaways for observables. Use observables to handle async things. Like, I'm just going to be very minimal with that. I know people back there, I know Ben Lish somewhere like, whoa, you know, he's probably going to add on to this and correct me, but for me, it's just like, use observables to handle async things. That might sound like, well, duh, but honestly, when I was thinking about observables, I was like, well, I use promises. Like, is observables trying to solve something differently? Like, why would I use anything else? I thought it was trying to solve a different case, but it's actually trying to solve the same case, but in a different way. So it is for asynchronous things and not something that you've never used before. Angular uses observables for 3 common things that I found out. I'm sure there's more internal things in there, but 3 things that I found out they use it for are querying the DOM with like view child and stuff like that, outputs, and HTTP. Those are like the 3 common things that Angular is going to use observables for. Now, you yourself might use observables for other things, and probably other things built into Angular that are also there, but for some of the most common things, that's what I ran into almost every application that I've built so far. I'm all about productivity. I'm not going to dig. I'm just going to, if it works, it's going to work for me. And like I said, RxJS has millions of operators. Like, you know, you don't need to know how an engine works to get a driver's license and drive a car. So don't go in and try to figure out what all these things are doing and like sitting there trying to write this like amazing chain of methods and like show off your friends of all the cool stuff you did with Rx. Like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Do the thing that works. You don't have to know everything. But there are some really advanced cool stuff. So once you hit like a wall where you just can't figure some stuff out, go back, check out the operators. It's probably in there. So last bit, most of the tough stuff, for me at least, had nothing to do with Angular. If you saw some of the stuff that I was talking about, it was a lot to do with TypeScript, like adopting that stuff, decorators, all types of stuff that I just did not understand. RxJS, most of it had nothing to do with Angular. If you take away all that stuff, Angular is actually pretty simple. It's just like, oh, here's a class, that's a component. Here's a DI system. That's it. Like, it's pretty simple. One thing I adopted is error-driven learning. So, like, it works. It works so good. I normally don't go Google something or ask somebody for help until I like hit an error and I can't figure it out. Like, because otherwise I don't know what to look for. And with Zone.js, the errors are like pretty good. Like, they'll tell you exactly where you messed up, and they'll be like, they'll put it right in your face. Like, they're not gonna hide it. And like, this is where you messed up. And you're like, cool. You can copy that and paste it, and like, you'll find an answer. Whereas before, you don't really know what you're looking for. At least I didn't. So I've like embraced that. When I see an error, I'm actually happy. So I'm like, yep, I'm about to figure this out in like 5 minutes. Whereas before, like, I just didn't know. Adopt there's a thing for that mentality. I mean, if you go look at the API reference on the Angular IO website, there's tons of stuff in there. There's probably a thing that you need that it's already built. There's a thing for that. And I found that out the hard way. I was in there like making all this manual stuff, and then Patrick came and was like, you know that there's a decorator for that. Oh, you know, there's a service for that. Oh, by the way, they made a thing for that too. I'm like, okay, that's great. Because I've been using a framework where they don't have things for that. So I've been like adopting that mentality. But Angular is actually like a kitchen sink. It's got everything for you. It's got the fine-grained controls to change detection or not. It's really awesome. So kind of had to get used to that and actually take advantage of it. So it's really awesome. And then dive in. One thing I tell people is like, you know, if you want to learn how to swim, you can take swimming lessons, Or you can go to a pool with lifeguards and just jump in. Right? That's what I do. So. And that's my talk. Thanks, guys.